Nigeria's unemployment rate has steadily been rising since 2015. It now sits at 33%. But what's behind this increase and what can be done to reverse the trend? Chinemerem Joseph reports.
A third of working-age adults in Nigeria are unemployed. That figure has more than trebled since the current government took over in 2015. Then it was 9.7%. Nigeria's economy slipped into recession in 2016 and unemployment rose by 4%. By 2018, it had climbed almost another 10% to more than 23%. When the pandemic hit in 2020, the economy suffered, taking jobs with it. By the end of the year, unemployment had risen to more than 27%. Nigeria's youth is hit hardest by the unemployment rate. Half of them don't have work. Experts say there is too much focus on the oil sector, meaning that jobs aren't created in other industries.
We need to give a chance to our own local industries to grow. We need to give a chance for our local industries to create jobs and employment. The unemployment rate in Nigeria, and I dare say, is very high. Our youthful population of people of the age of about 18 to about 40 is almost close to about 60% of our population. You can use that to your advantage. You could also use that to your detriment. The fact that we need to create jobs for this set of people, we need to create an enabling environment for this set of people to live a gainful life.
Analysts say the rate of unemployment will continue to rise in coming years if the government doesn't take action. They say the economy should be diversified with more investment in the real estate and technology industries. Chinemerem Joseph for Rise News.
Right, welcome back. Tundu, when those numbers came out, we're quite shocked at the numbers.
It's depressing. It actually ruined my mood when I saw the numbers. I mean, this report by Chinemerem talks about youth unemployment. I want to highlight female unemployment as well. 35.2% of Nigerian women who are eligible to join the workforce have not or cannot. It's really staggering. It actually has tripled our rate of unemployment in the past 5 years. And yes, the COVID-19 pandemic obviously is a huge factor, but we cannot continue to use that as an excuse. This is a failure. This is the only word for it. It's an absolute disaster and a failure, especially because there seems to be no end in sight. I don't see where is the silver lining. I was trying to look for one yesterday. What is the way out? I really don't see it, because what we're talking about now, economic growth-wise, according to IMF, 1.5% growth. I mean, really, it's grim. The total failure.
Grim, Dr. Abati?
Well, I think we took this topic also, was it yesterday?
Yes.
And one of the conclusions we reached is that, look, the country is practically sitting on a keg of gunpowder. Because if indeed it is true, according to population statistics, that the majority of Nigerians are young, just as the majority of Africans are young, then they go to school, they come out, they cannot find work to do. It's not just the unemployment figure, 33.3 by Q4 of 2020, up from about 25.7 in the second quarter of 2020. When you disaggregate it further, that is where it is even more frightening. Tundu has cited the example of the number of, the female population, the percentage that is unemployed. Now, if you look at the youth age bracket, people between the ages of 18 and 34, in fact, the number of unemployed people within that bracket is higher than the national average for Q4 of 2020, which is 33.3. For that age bracket, it is 45.2%. According to the National Bureau of Statistics. That is how frightening it is. And when you look at the statistics provided by the National Bureau of Statistics, you go further down, you look at some of the states like Imo, states like Rivers, where there is very serious unemployment rates. Now, if you look at the unemployment rate, then you look at the underemployment rate, and you add the two together, I mean, you are looking at a very frightening figure, which shows that perhaps about half of the population between the ages of 18 and maybe 64 that are still active are either unemployed or they are underemployed. And why I say that that is a serious crisis is because, I mean, I used the phrase yesterday that the idle hand is the devil's workshop. And we saw an indication of this in terms of what happened during the NSAS protest. Look at the population of other unemployed or underemployed persons that eventually hijacked the process. In fact, in the aggregate axis of Lagos, by the way, has the lowest rate of underemployment. But even then, what we saw in Lagos was not something that any country should have to be managing. 1 million boys and other kinds of persons who took over the streets because they were available to be recruited, and they hijacked what was meant to be a peaceful and intentioned protest at that time. Look at the crime rate, because this unemployment rate or underemployment, we have to link it to other issues within the economy. The crime rate, the number of young men in Nigeria today who just want to get rich quick because they don't see any opportunity within the system. And they take to crime, they take to wire, they take to yahoo, they take to all forms of crime. Kidnapping has become sadly, and I guess this can be linked to the kind of figures we've been told by the MBS, because these are not just figures. These are figures that you can relate to social reality. Look at kidnapping, that has also become a vocation, and the implications for security, for the dignity of the human person within the Nigerian environment. Well, we can go on and draw the lines in terms of the implications for national security, for social stability, for the dignity of the human person, and for even the peace and general well-being of society. The question is, what should government do about it? These statistics are not just meant for cold announcement. The statistics coming from the National Bureau of Statistics should inform policy, should inform leadership, should inform future processes. Now, government at all levels often claim that they have all kinds of policies to create employment, to keep the youth engaged, to make sure that youth unemployment does not become a problem for Nigeria. Why is it that these policies have not yielded the desired effect? These are some of the questions that we should be asking. Is it something about the vision and the execution and the implementation of some of those policies? Government says they will create 100 million jobs in 10 years. Where are those jobs? Some of the examples that we have seen in terms of some of the projects that have been outlined is either to give money to people, money that cannot serve their purposes or provide businesses for them, or to go give them hose and cutlasses in an age of industrial revolution. So these are some of the contradictions. Many of the factories that used to employ people, they've become churches, places of religious worship. So this is the problem. We need long-term vision, strategy, commitment, and the will to ensure that the economic issues we face are addressed.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, once again, what we do with it matters and counts. All right, that's all on the news headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Ruth Zudiri, Michael Wilson, Adesu Amora, Aaron Akerja to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Let's just go straight to Reuters this morning. Reuters, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning to all our viewers. We kick off with debt. The Debt Management Office put out a press release stating that, and this is not a surprise, there it is, Nigeria's public debts as of December 31st, 2020 has now increased to 32.9 trillion naira, includes debt stock of the federal, state governments, as well as the federal capital territory. No surprise, they mentioned other governments around the world, borrowings increasing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in fact, interestingly enough, you look at the Appropriation Act for debt financing and so on, it was actually reducing. From 2017, we're at 2.3 trillion naira. 2018, it was 2.01 trillion naira. 2019, 1.6 trillion. And then initially, before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the Appropriation Act initially allocated about 1.5 trillion naira for 2020. But then they had to now, borrow more, and then they appropriated about 4.2 trillion. Now, some of that includes, borrowings from the IMF, concessionary loans, and so on and so forth. But public debt now has increased. So public debt to GDP is now 21.6%. Remember, they've increased the ceiling to 40% to allow for more borrowing. I have to say that the next administration coming in 2023, they're going to have a large pile of debts waiting for them when they come into office. We move to inflation. I mean, with all the talk of unemployment, the day after, the doctor broke this news while Emmanuel Ifeni was doing the newspaper review yesterday. Inflation is now at a 4-year high, headline inflation of 17.3%. Food inflation has now crossed the 20% Rubicon, is now, I think, 21.79% for food inflation. You've got rising unemployment, you've got rising inflation, you've got GDP growth at, we'll wait to see what Q1 figures are, but the stagflation word is what continues to be thrown about with respect to Nigeria. Fuel stations, we see that the unions and the federal government are still debating fuel prices. Now, they said there was not going to be any increase in the month of March. What happens in April? If there is an increase in fuel prices in April as a result of crude oil prices, although crude oil has kind of moderated a bit over the last 3 days, but what is the pass-through effect? What is the impact on inflation? There is going to be a pass-through effect. So this period is if there is an increase, just know it's going to pass through to transportation, which is going to filter through to food, which is going to filter through to other goods and services. So that's something to look out for. Look out and see what happens in April, hopefully when the federal government and the unions are done with their discussions on what to do about the price. Remember, it's supposed to be a deregulated downstream sector. To USSDs, remember we talked about the mobile network operators threatening as of Monday, the 16th of March, to disconnect USSD services from financial service providers as a result of a 42 billion naira debt that they were owed. So Dr. Issa Pantami, who is the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, said that he suspended that move and called a stakeholders meeting. And the meeting included the telcos, included the banks, even the central bank was represented. And they came out with an announcement that there is now a flat 6 naira 98 kobo USSD fee. If you take a look at the summary here, essentially what this means is that for every USSD session where you transfer money, it's a flat fee of 6 naira 98 kobo. Before, you used to be charged for they were called 20-second sessions. So for every 20 seconds that you spend on the USSD platform, I think it was like, the telcos, there are different charges that were deducted from your airtime. I think it was about 4 naira. So before, if you spend 1 minute transferring money using your star or hash something, 20 seconds into 1 minute is times 3, right? So you'll be charged for 3 20-second sessions at 4 naira per session. That's 12 naira. But now, if you spend 1 minute sending money via USSD, you pay a flat fee of 6 naira 98 kobo. Before, they used to be deducted from airtime. Now, the fee will be collected from bank accounts, right, and then remitted to the telcos. Now, the banks will not impose any additional charges. As far as the settlement of the 42 billion naira debt, they say that the discussions are progressing. Somebody has to pay that. They didn't say anything about what happens if a USSD transaction does not go through. But as of right now, effective yesterday, it's now a flat fee of 6 naira 98 kobo. Flutterwave and PayPal are collaborating for African businesses who initially tried to collect money from PayPal accounts overseas. There were issues. PayPal hasn't really been friendly to the African continent. They claim, well, not official sources, but people say that it's because of the way the sector is. They had a few issues with trying to construct payments. So Flutterwave is partnering with them to allow African merchants around the continent collect money from PayPal. PayPal has about, I think, 33 million users or so. So that's a big inflow through this collaboration. Remember, Flutterwave made news. They are the latest unicorn from Nigeria, 1 billion naira valuation with their latest $170 million. Dollars. Thank you. Thank you, Rufai. $170 million. On tech, still tankers. The Vanguard is reporting that the eToro app has been having some issues, and there were tankers that flooded the streets yesterday around the ports. They said this is not quite substantiated by the officials, but they understand that the app crashed. That's what they were saying, and that they're still trying to get the tankers to adhere to parking in the satellite parking locations that they provided to them, which they haven't done yet. The advisor to Governor Sanwo-Olu on transportation said they're still working around this. And then finally, the central bank is commemorating Global Money Week. Global Money Week begins on the 22nd to the 28th. It's about financial awareness, financial advocacy, financial literacy, and the CBN is going to be doing a social media challenge. The social media challenge, they are telling people to show creative ways in which you can save money, and you're supposed to, there it is, social media challenge between the 16th of March and the 26th. Eligible people are between 18 and 35. You can win some tech, a new laptop or some other gadgets, and you're supposed to upload, tag them, I think using the hashtag GMD week and so on. And it's supposed to essentially promote, there it is. So showcase your talent, artworks, and skills by posting a 120-second video or photo of how you can take care of yourself and take care of your money. So that's the Central Bank of Nigeria commemorating Global Money Week.
Okay, Rotu, so sad we can't get into that competition. It's quite funny. They've just screened us out. You know why? But moving on real quickly, the big elephant in the room is they shouldn't just say that they are progressing that conversation about the 42 billion. The banks should pay. So it's obvious now that all of these collections were being made. Who was collecting the money initially when they pull it out from your account? Some banks charge as much as 20 naira, Rotus.
Yeah.
So who was collecting the money? And why can't the banks pay the people that were providing the service? Because one thing I know for free, the bankers are not providing the infrastructure for USSD.
It's the telcos.
It's the telcos.
Correct.
So all of this jamboree they did, and they made it look funny to us in the face, is just to be able to save their interest. They should pay the telcos what the telcos deserve. And it's quite shocking we don't always do this. We just allow people to do merry-go-round in the end. That's why that process was iffy from the very start. I never supported the meeting. I was like, there was no point the minister coming in with them. The banks should settle themselves out with the telcos. And that for 2 billion, they should pay the telcos. Because when they pay the telcos, it will deepen the use of technology in this country. They'll be able to invest in those technologies and improve the USSD system. And think of how to even disrupt the USSD system. USSD system is an old technology.
Well, yes, and the CBN and NCC announcement, that's the Communications Commission, did say that people have alternatives, apps, internet banking, and so on. You don't have to use USSD.
Yeah, so it's an old technology. It's just because of the way we find ourselves in this country, and that's why we're using that. I mean, it's so soon for the app to have problems. So the app at the ports, did they test it well? The eToro app, did they test it well? It's so soon for that app to start having problems. When did they launch the app?
It's early teething problems.
Okay, if you say so.
6.98 for those charges relating to USSD. Why 6.98? Why not 7 naira?
I know, right?
And then, when we first discussed this, I had expressed concern that there was nobody in the room to defend the interests of the consumer, the end user.
Right.
Are you satisfied that the interest of the end user has been covered? You say it's a flat rate for just one transaction, or for whatever transaction you carry out a whole day. I think we still need the information.
Some clarity, right. But it's per session, yeah.
The e-call-up system, Adiza Usman, when she was on this program, she was very optimistic that it will solve the problem. What happened? Is it corruption? Should those vehicles be moved somewhere far away from outside Lagos, from which they can be called up, instead of locating them so close to the port? But we don't have more time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Rotus. We'll go for a quick break. We'll come back to Michael Woodson. Right, welcome back. We're moving on to business update, global business update. Michael Woodson joins us from London. Michael, great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. So basically, it's all paused really in front of the FOMC meeting tonight, and what the US Federal Reserve says about that market wisdom is that both US bond yields and the dollar could jump if the Fed statement isn't dovish enough. This is turning out to be, never mind the vaccine, the actual long-term interest rate rising slightly, and interest rates rising slightly more quickly than the markets had thought that they would, is actually a major worry now for investors or professional investors, rather than rather than the vaccine itself. So basically then, as far as Asian markets are concerned, not a lot really. Australia down, Nikkei 225 down, Shanghai Composite near flat, but the Shenzhen component up, that's their industrial base, up about 1%. That follows an overnight session where the Dow Jones lost 130 points. So in China, Alibaba's search engine has been removed from several app stores in China as the company's feud with the Chinese government authorities continues. Android app stores, including those operated by Huawei and Xiaomi, have blocked download. Meanwhile, China's president is saying that there should be an acceleration of laws and rules on the so-called platform companies, a sign that Beijing is actually clamping down further on the country's technology plans. The term platform, that's basically like a broad brush for technology companies operating anything from social media businesses and so on. China's battle for tech self-reliance continues. The top patent holder, or patent holder if you prefer, Huawei, said that by the end of 2020, it more than doubled its active patents to more than 100,000, up from 85,000 at the end of 2019. It's basic. Huawei is a company that has patents in telecoms, 5G technology, and so on. It's also filed patent applications for video surveillance technologies and other forms of artificial intelligence. So a clear indication that after the Trump years, now China actually going for technical self-reliance. Just on a very important subject, we don't often talk about hog futures or agricultural commodities, but authorities are struggling with African swine fever virus strains and illegal vaccines. China is the world's biggest pork market. Scientists are saying that the variants are now spreading very, very quickly. Commodity brokers are getting desperate for information. They're not getting any at all. As far as US-China diplomacy is concerned, so the United States top diplomat slammed China's sweeping years of coercion and aggression. US Secretary of State Blinken, he was talking from Tokyo ahead of the meeting in Alaska between the two superpowers tomorrow and Friday. It'll be the first face-to-face meeting between the Chinese government and the Biden administration. It's not going to be between the two leaders. It's going to be between senior officials. But hoping that some sort of diplomacy will come out of that. But it started off with a diplomatic spat, probably as you'd expect. So as I said, the Fed in focus. It concludes its two-day policy meeting today. According to many people, many observers, it's been one of the most critical events of the Fed for some time. The chairman, Jerome Powell, there he is, they will have to convince investors the current policy is actually correct, and it won't change interest rates in response to what it will also say is a brighter economic outlook. So it's a bit of a tightrope there. Confusion in Europe about vaccine. Now, so the EU has actually backtracked on the suspension of AstraZeneca, as the European regulator said that the benefits outweigh the risks. And now, given that backtrack, so they may be getting back to some kind of normality, or at least some kind of faster rollout. But at the same time, there are plans now emerging for a COVID certificate for all EU countries to get tourism started again. You can't help feeling that some of these European countries have been actually talking to Brussels and saying, I think you should stop messing around and get our tourism industry back on track for the summer, because it's crucial to some of these economies. I'm thinking Greece, I'm thinking Italy, I'm thinking Spain, I'm also thinking France as well. Paris is the most visited city in the world. Vaccine woes, though, continue. The European Union has now, other members have suspended. So there's a terribly confusing message coming out of this. And I've been saying to people in this country, you do not want to be with your family at the borders of a country after a nasty, cheap flight with everybody griping and crying and cross and so on, and to find out that suddenly you aren't certificated for where you want to go. So it's absolute confusion. Notably, the United Kingdom, we're feeling very self-satisfied, but we are stuck on this island with nowhere to go. Now the UK global Britain in competitive age. The doctor and I were talking about this yesterday. This is a hell of a global balancing act between the UK and, for example, China. The foreign secretary has also been overheard saying an elite thing of seek trade deals with countries with bad human rights records, like China, for example, because if we don't, then we'll miss out on growth markets of the future. There's that then. So now, important employment law. Uber in the UK says it will give its 70,000 UK drivers a guaranteed holiday pay and pensions of up to £8.72 an hour. Been a long legal battle. The people on the side of Uber are saying, well, that's fine, but Uber is only paying for the hours that drivers actually work, not the hours that they're actually on call. So they're saying, so do people who work in busy supermarkets, for example, if they're not manning the tills 24 hours a day, very, very busily, do they get paid less than their people who are working through a busy time? So that argument's got a long way to go. But it's got also very, very important pushing forward for the gig economy, as you no doubt appreciate. Oil's eased ever so slightly, getting a further impression that this kind of sweet spot between $60 and $70 a barrel is gradually what the oil market at the moment is marking time for. We'll see about that. Gold is continuing to tease bullish investors. It's not really going anywhere. It's circling from a position of strength, but not very far. And we'll see. Again, it's all really down to the Fed. So in these days ahead, then, what's actually happening? For FOMC, assuming that the FOMC plays the game, the Bank of England, Bank of Japan, tomorrow towards the end of the week, should make monetary policy decisions as well, which will keep the markets happy. But again, this major concern, I keep going on about it now, is emerging of interest rates rising more quickly than the markets expected them to, and that will actually rattle the markets for the foreseeable future. Let's see what the Fed says this evening. We'll no doubt talk about it tomorrow. That's your global view.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I want to take you back to the China-US diplomatic spat that you mentioned, or China dash, fill in the blanks, whoever is their villain du jour. It's been Australia over wines, Norwegian salmon, Taiwanese pineapples. Really, how can the US or the UK or anybody else, how can they realistically counter China's tendency towards economic browbeating? And of course, you've told us before that China has now become the EU's #1 trading partner. They have their tentacles everywhere and do tend to pull their strings when they're, upset about something or the other. How can this be countered?
Yeah, they also know very well, and you can see this, whatever you're actually seeing as far as their attack on their own high-tech industries are concerned, they know that they need to increase foreign investment. They know that they need to play the games of the high table that they're actually wanting to get to. They know that they have a demographic impact, hitting them as their population gets older and their workforce begins to shrink. There are all sorts of ways in which these tentacles, as you describe them, can be slightly numbed, but the key to it is diplomacy, and that's what we're headed towards at the moment. I live in hope for future generations that what we're seeing now, a change of administration in the United States, is such that we can actually sit down. We have to work with these things. International diplomacy isn't simple. Neither is, I talked with the doctor about this yesterday, about Britain's role in terms of international trade. It's tough. It's tough being in the international forum, and you are doing business with countries that you might not actually intrinsically like. I would say to you, before you fill up your car, for example, do you think about the wages of poor oil workers in Saudi Arabia? I suspect you may, or you may not, but you still continue to do it. So, there's a lot of things that we have to take for granted and don't necessarily challenge if we're going to head towards the bright uplands of out of this pandemic and into some kind of prosperity, wherever that may lie.
Michael, well, I would like you to comment on the report now presented by the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee of the UK Parliament, in which they are accusing some British firms of violating certain rules in China and being complicit in the maltreatment of the Uyghur Muslims in that part of the country and promoting, inadvertently, as it were perhaps, slave labor. And they are calling on the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to take a second look at the United Kingdom's relationship with China, and then at the same time to make sure that the Modern Slavery Act is strengthened. That's the Modern Slavery Act of 2015. What do you think is likely to happen? Will government just ignore that? And then in China, which we talked about, you mentioned Alibaba. Alibaba has been asked to divest from certain investments, particularly Weibo. I hope that's how it's called, the Twitter equivalent in China. And also to divest from the South China Morning Post, the newspaper. And the big excuse that the Chinese government is giving is that Alibaba's investment poses a threat to the Communist Party, particularly its propaganda apparatus. Now, what's going on in China? Is this a clampdown, not just on business, but also the right of persons to promote the media?
Right, business ethics first. As I say, if you fill up your car and you put petrol in there, are you thinking about the total supply chain of that liquid before it gets in your car, whether it be diesel, oil, indeed electricity? Are you thinking about where the veins of those particular machines that get charged by the wind are actually made? Do you worry where polypropylene comes from? Do you consider every purchase that you actually make within your life? Do you actually go right down the supply chain and work out whether there are any modern day slaves actually working on that? With the mobile phone, for example, do you question where the cobalt comes from and the other precious metals to charge it? You may well do. If you do, then don't use it. If you don't and you use it, then what you're doing is we are all guilty of using a capitalist system to further our own ways. I think that the diplomatic balancing act is incredibly difficult. I think that what you have to be is realistic about it. If you want to get going with prosperity, you have to understand that you will have to hold your nose, as it were, and deal with setups that you don't actually like. As far as China's attack on its high-tech companies are concerned, well, it's a way forward. We saw what happened with Jack Ma. We've not seen a great deal of Jack Ma, have we? We know, I was telling you last week, we followed where his jet went. He's still around, he's still talking, but he hasn't actually raised his head above the parapet. The feeling that some of these high-tech companies in China, and indeed organs like the South China Post, are against or not in favor of the Chinese authoritarian communist system. Yeah, of course they are. But, it's a different way of dealing with things. So what you have to do is you have to say, can we continue to work with these people? Answer to that question is we probably will have to, like you will, like most countries actually do. We can talk about slavery. We can talk about modern day slavery. It happens. It's very unfortunate. Nobody's condoning it. But actually, if you start dissecting the actual supply chains of everything you actually buy and use, you aren't going to use anything.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Michael. We'll take another quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about this one more. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, and this one more is here with us. This one, great to have you.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Dr. Abati, and good morning, Tundun.
Morning.
We are definitely seeing a rise in infections in some countries. India, with the world's highest tally of infections after the United States and Brazil, saw its highest daily increase since December 13 yesterday. And while Brazil recorded its highest single-day fatality since the pandemic began also yesterday, bringing a global total to what you're seeing on your screen. Well, here in Nigeria, we are still on that downward trajectory. 19 states were responsible for 179 new infections, just as vaccination picks up across the country. Now, the president of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, has become the latest top government official to take a jab of the AstraZeneca vaccine in Nigeria. The shot was administered by his personal physician, and he is urging Nigerians to take the vaccine, reassuring them of its safety. Away from that, the WTO Director General, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, met with critical stakeholders yesterday in her continued official visit to Nigeria. She met with members of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, as well as the CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele. She has commended Nigeria's response to the pandemic so far, especially Governor Emefiele and the private sector COVID. However, wherever she went, one message reverberated, and it was that Nigeria must not waste the opportunity presented by this crisis. Let's take a listen to what she had to say exactly.
We should ask ourselves the questions you raised, Governor. Why is it that the pharmaceutical companies that opened here struggled and closed? What are we doing to make sure, as you said, this doesn't happen? What are we doing to see that our own domestic manufacturers of pharmaceuticals have the appropriate environment they need? We've now seen what happens. If you have this pandemic and you don't have some ability to provide, you have to wait. Sometimes in a queue where there's supply scarcity. And we've been pushing and pushing through COVAX, but you see everybody is demanding these vaccines. So I think, and medicines, I think we must learn the lessons now.
Indeed, we must learn the lessons now. WTO DG, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, yesterday. Away from Nigeria, yesterday a joint statement came from governments of France and Italy. They say they stand ready to resume AstraZeneca vaccinations pending a positive review by the European Union Medicine Agency, that's the EMA. They described the preliminary elements shared yesterday by the EMA as encouraging. And ahead of its Thursday's critical meeting, the EMA said it remains firmly convinced that the benefits of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine outweigh its risk. Meanwhile, Thailand, you would recall, was the first country out of the EU to halt its AstraZeneca vaccination. Well, the country made a U-turn yesterday and commenced its vaccination, with Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha taking the first jab to boost public confidence. There you have him on your screen. And other cabinet members followed. He is to actually meet with President Biden next month. So away from Thailand, in the USA, the latest data published by the CDC shows that nearly 111 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines have now been administered in the country. The 7-day average remains above 2.4 million doses per day, comprising of 3 different vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson. It also comes even as the White House says it will welcome Republicans and former Vice President Trump's help in promoting vaccine to his supporters.
I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's good that they are pushing the vaccine. But from what is obvious to everybody in the world now, there's a dint of, political manipulations in that AstraZeneca impasse. Because from what they said, when you look at the people that are taking the AstraZeneca jab, vis-a-vis the reaction, and they've not been able to empirically trace it to the AstraZeneca jab, and the fact that EU nations led the way, and the antecedents of the problem EU had with AstraZeneca because they felt they let them down and they favored the UK, then there's been some political impasse around it. Because when you look at the data, we always look at the data in science to lead us. How many people have reported blood clots? Were those blood clots related to the jab they took? People can have blood clots normally. In those areas where they talk about blood clots, about 500 people in the year have blood clots and deep vein thrombosis. Your sedentary lifestyle can cause a blood clot. Deep vein thrombosis can be caused by sedentary lifestyle and flying long distances. We had a Nigerian singing superstar many years ago that died as a result of deep vein thrombosis when she was flying around the country, the world. I forget her name now, but you know that lady. She was a popular star when she died. She was a singer. Died of deep vein. I've had close friends that died of deep vein thrombosis because of their hectic sedentary lifestyle.
And the pill, contraceptive pill.
And contraceptive pill. So them trying to relate it to the AstraZeneca vaccine, we all know it's beginning to look quite very political. But the one big takeaway for me was the question Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala asked. That why is it that all the pharmaceutical companies and other companies never survived in this country? Where the Americans are taking Moderna vaccine. I have a friend that was in the same class, executive management class, one of the founders of Moderna. They read out the Moderna case study. 2 years ago, Moderna was a small company. When all of this happened, the American gave them over $450 million and took one of the guys, co-founder for Moderna, to lead Operation Warp Speed. That's how government can support pharmaceutical companies. And they are enjoying it today. The Moderna vaccine has rolled out. Yeah. This is a company less than 2 years old.
How many of our companies have government turned into a poster child and say, we will support you and show to the world?
You can't tell that story too often, actually, Rufai. It's actually really encouraging, and it shows exactly what's possible. But I just have a quick one here. Yeah. Trump, well, former President Trump, whatever we call him now, called into Fox News yesterday recommending that people take the vaccine, saying it's safe and something that works. Just as an update, he's actually come out publicly. Okay.
Well, very quickly, I mean, the progress you have seen in the United States, I think should be attributed to the commitment that President Biden has shown. You will recall that as part of his America Rescue Plan, the vaccination program is top of it, and making sure that every American gets a chance to have the vaccine. And what has been done since he assumed office, he has set a May 1 deadline to ensure that every American that needs the vaccine has an opportunity to get it. And he says May 1 is an absolute deadline. And since he ramped up that vaccination program, an additional 700 community centers have been set up across America. As you pointed out, 79 million people have taken one dose, over 39 million people have taken additional doses. And he's hoping that by July 4, he's promising Americans that they will be able to at least gather in small numbers to celebrate Independence Day. What you see there is determination. What you see there is leadership. Yes, the AstraZeneca vaccine, yes, it's been politicized. Mario Draghi, the Italian Prime Minister, and President Macron decided to lift the suspension that their two countries have imposed on the rollout, on the continued, application of the vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine. And their conclusion is that it looks like the various countries, 20 countries across Europe, will seem to have placed politics before science, and that science should be more important. And the EMA, European Medicines Agency, came up yesterday and said, look, yes, it looks like this is politics, because the EMA itself has also been accused of what is called the Brexit sock, and that's the politics of it. You trace it back all to Brexit, all to the disagreement with the Anglo-Swedish company about contractual, infractions, and all that politics about the EU on imposing export restrictions on the deployment of AstraZeneca vaccine from European factories. But I think it's good that at last good reason has prevailed. WHO has said that there's no connection between the side effects that have been seen in terms of the blood clotting, the blood coagulation, and the vaccine itself. And that, of course, will help. But the main issue now is, to what extent will the politics that we have seen affect trust and confidence, in the vaccine, this particular vaccine? Look at a country like Congo. Congo, in spite of all of this, is still saying it will still be careful. That it's better to be safe than sorry. But I hope that with time, science will drive the process and politics will take the backseat. As for Dr. Kunjawala, yes, she's been very consistent on how the WTO can help the supply chains to ensure that those who demand the vaccines are not victims of trade restrictions.
All right, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your coverage.